You are suffering right now because you believe you are separate from the world around you. This fundamental illusion is the root of your anxiety, your loneliness, and your fear. But what if I told you that this separation never existed, that it was merely a convention, a social fiction we've all agreed to believe? Today, I will show you how to break through this illusion and experience the profound liberation that comes when you realize what you truly are. If you continue living in separation, you'll never know the effortless joy that is your birthright. The transformation I'm about to describe isn't just philosophical. It's the difference between a life of struggle and one of natural harmony. The most powerful deception in human experience is the belief that you are a separate self. You've been taught since childhood that you are an isolated entity, a skin-encapsulated ego, somehow inside your body looking out at a world that is foreign to you. This is the fundamental illusion. From your earliest days, people pointed at you and said you, and pointed at the world and said that, as if there were a real boundary between the two. Your parents, your teachers, your entire culture reinforced this idea until you couldn't see anything else. You came to believe that you were born into this world, rather than recognizing that you grew out of it just as an apple grows from a tree. Think about it this way. A tree produces apples, and an apple contains seeds that may become new trees. But we wouldn't say the apple is separate from the tree. We recognize it as a process of the tree, an expression of its nature. Similarly, you are not separate from the universe. You are what the whole universe is doing right here, right now, in the form of you. Just as the wave is not separate from the ocean, you are not separate from the totality of existence. When you observe closely, this separation dissolves. Your breathing connects you constantly with the atmosphere. Your body is made of elements borrowed temporarily from the earth. Your thoughts arise from cultural patterns you've absorbed. Nothing about you stands apart from the universe. The successful person recognizes this interconnection, while those who struggle cling desperately to the boundaries of their imagined self. Consider the air you're breathing right now. You can't exist without it for more than a few minutes, yet do you consider it part of you? The boundary of your skin is not a barrier, but an interface, a place of constant exchange. The oxygen entering your lungs becomes part of your blood, your cells, your brain. Where exactly does not you become you? The food you ate yesterday is now your body. The water you drink flows through you and back into the environment. You are not a static entity, but a flowing process, a whirlpool in the river of existence. Look at your hand. Is it really yours? Or is it a flowing pattern of energy, constantly exchanging atoms with the environment, never the same from one moment to the next? The atoms in your body are replaced regularly. You don't have the same body you had 7 years ago. Your cells die and are reborn continuously. Even your thoughts and feelings are in constant flux. What then is this permanent self you believe in? When you truly see this, the burden of maintaining your separate identity falls away, revealing the effortless power that comes from alignment with reality. Modern physics confirms what mystics have known for millennia. Matter itself, when examined at the quantum level, dissolves into probability waves and energy fields. The solid world is an illusion created by our limited senses. The boundaries between objects, including the boundary between you and the world, exist only at the level of conventional reality. At the deepest level, everything is interconnected in a single field of being. You are not in the universe. You are the universe, having localized and personalized itself into the pattern you temporarily call me. The desire to control life is the second great source of suffering. You believe you must manipulate the world to find happiness. But this approach is fundamentally flawed and exhausting. Those who struggle are constantly fighting against the current of life, while those who thrive have discovered how to float. Your need for control stems directly from your sense of separation. Because you feel separate and vulnerable, you believe you must defend yourself against a potentially hostile universe. This creates a life of tension, vigilance, and anxiety. Notice how much energy you expend trying to make reality conform to your preferences. You want pleasant experiences to last and unpleasant ones to end. You want people to behave according to your expectations. You want your body to remain youthful and healthy indefinitely. This resistance to the natural flow of change is like swimming upstream in a powerful river. Eventually, it depletes you completely. The paradox is absolute. The more you try to control life, the more life controls you. The more desperately you seek happiness, the more it eludes you. This isn't philosophical wordplay. It's the practical reality of human psychology. The minds that dominate our world understand that true power comes from harmonizing with reality, not opposing it. Consider the martial art of Aikido, where you don't oppose the opponent's force, but blend with it, redirect it. The master doesn't use strength against strength, but moves with the attack, transforming its energy. This is the perfect metaphor for how to engage with all of life. Instead of resistance, practice acceptance. Not passive resignation, but active embracing of what is. The next time you feel anxiety or frustration, stop fighting. Notice how the energy transforms when you simply allow it to be, without naming it as bad or trying to push it away. This is the warrior's path, not fighting against reality, but having the courage to see and accept it completely. Let me clarify what I mean by acceptance. This is not about tolerating injustice or allowing yourself to be harmed. It's about recognizing reality as it is before deciding how to respond. Many people waste enormous energy arguing with what has already happened, refusing to accept that this moment is exactly as it is. Only by starting with clear acceptance of what is, can you effectively respond and create change. The person who accepts reality has far more power to transform it than the person who denies it. Think of a surfer riding a massive wave. The surfer doesn't control the ocean. That would be impossible. Instead, they develop the skill to work with its enormous power. They study its patterns, feel its rhythms, and position themselves to move with it rather than against it. The wave that would destroy someone who fought against it becomes a source of exhilaration and power for the one who knows how to harmonize with it. This is the essence of living wisely, not controlling life, but skillfully dancing with it. Your perception creates your reality. Most humans live imprisoned by a web of concepts they mistake for the world itself. Words, ideas, and beliefs form invisible barriers that separate you from direct experience. The universe you inhabit is not the universe itself, but a model created by your thinking mind. You don't see reality as it is. You see your ideas about reality. This is why two people can witness the same event and have completely different experiences of it. They're not seeing the same thing. They're seeing their beliefs projected onto the same thing. Language, while incredibly useful, is also the primary tool of separation. When you name something, you create an artificial boundary between yourself and what you're naming. Tree, cloud, person. These are not things in themselves, but concepts, symbols that stand for experiences that are actually seamless with everything else. The word is never the thing it represents. The menu is not the meal. The map is not the territory. Yet most people confuse their maps with the actual territory of life and suffer accordingly. The great sages throughout history discovered that the thinking mind, while useful for practical tasks, becomes a tyrant when it dominates consciousness. Your mind evolved primarily as a problem-solving tool. It's excellent at dividing, categorizing, and manipulating the environment. But it achieves this by creating artificial separations, by analyzing rather than synthesizing. When this analytical tool becomes your primary mode of experiencing life, you lose touch with the undivided wholeness of reality. Great artists, athletes, and visionaries all describe the same phenomenon. Their greatest achievements happen when the separate self steps aside. This is the state of flow, what Zen masters call no mind, where action becomes effortless and time dissolves. The pianist doesn't think about each individual note. The basketball player doesn't calculate the physics of the shot. They become one with the activity, and something greater than their separate self performs the action through them. This is not mystical, but practical. The highest performance in any field comes when the illusion of separation temporarily falls away. Try this experiment. For just 5 minutes, experience the world without naming anything. Look without labeling. Listen without categorizing. This simple practice begins to dissolve the conceptual barriers between you and reality. While others remain trapped in their mental prisons, You can step into the boundless freedom that exists beyond thought. Don't take my word for this. Test it yourself. Right now, wherever you are, look around and experience everything freshly, as if you had never seen it before and had no words for any of it. Notice the vivid immediacy of direct experience compared to the dullness of conceptual thinking. The fear of death reveals the depth of the illusion. You fear death because you believe something real is ending. But when you look closely at what you call I, you find no permanent entity that could die. The body changes completely over time. Thoughts arise and pass like clouds. Feelings flow like rivers. What exactly is this self that fears its own domination? Consider this carefully. What in you is actually afraid of death? It's only the idea of yourself, the mental image you've constructed. The real you, the awareness in which all experiences appear, never began, and so cannot end. It's like the space in a room. You can remove all the objects, but the space remains. You can demolish the walls, but you haven't destroyed the space. You've simply changed its boundaries. Similarly, awareness itself is not affected by the apparent birth and death of the body-mind organism you temporarily identify with. Death terrifies the separate self, because death is the ultimate proof that separation is illusory. Your life is like a wave on the ocean. It appears, has form for a time, then merges back into the sea. The wave doesn't die in any real sense. It simply returns to what it always was. Those who grasp this truth live with extraordinary freedom, while those who deny it remain haunted by mortality. In many traditional cultures, people understood this intuitively. They saw themselves not as isolated individuals, but as threads in a great tapestry of life that extended beyond birth and death. They recognized that consciousness doesn't belong to them personally, but flows through them temporarily, just as a river flows through a particular section of landscape without being confined to it. This understanding didn't eliminate grief when loved ones died, but it transformed the grief into something less desperate, less fearful. Instead of fearing death, use it as your advisor. Ask yourself regularly, if I died tomorrow, would this matter? This perspective burns away the trivial and reveals what has true value. The awareness of mortality becomes not a source of anxiety, but the key to living with absolute authenticity and purpose. Notice how your priorities shift when you bring death into your awareness, how petty concerns fall away, how love and presence become more important than achievement or accumulation. This is not morbid but liberating. The roots of human conflict are in this same illusion. Nations, religions, and ideologies fight because they mistake their mental models for reality itself. They create artificial boundaries and then fight to defend them, never recognizing that these boundaries exist only in thought. Consider how absurd it would be if the waves of the ocean fought each other, each claiming to be the true ocean and denying the others. Yet this is precisely what humans do when they fight over arbitrary divisions like nationality, race, or creed. Look at history's greatest peacemakers. They all shared the ability to see beyond these artificial divisions. They recognized that beneath the surface differences, humans share the same consciousness. The most evolved minds understand that harming others is harming oneself, not as a moral principle, but as a direct perception of reality. When you truly grasp that separation is an illusion, violence becomes as unthinkable as deliberately cutting off your own hand. Not because it's wrong, but because it makes no sense once you perceive the deeper unity. The next time you find yourself in conflict, pause and ask, what boundary am I defending? Often you'll discover it's not a real thing, but a concept, an identity, an image you've created of yourself. When you let go of these mental constructs, conflict often dissolves naturally, replaced by creative collaboration. This doesn't mean you become passive or allow yourself to be exploited. On the contrary, you can act with greater clarity and effectiveness when you're not blinded by the illusion of separation. True freedom means liberation from this fundamental illusion of separation. Most people define freedom as getting what I want, but this keeps them trapped in endless desire. The conventional idea of freedom is actually a sophisticated form of imprisonment. You believe you'll be free when you have enough money, the right relationship, the perfect body, the ideal career. But each achievement only creates new desires, new requirements for happiness. This pursuit has no end. It's like trying to quench thirst by drinking salt water. Absolute freedom comes when you realize there is no separate I that needs anything to be complete. The freest people in history weren't those with the most options or the fewest constraints. They were those who realized that freedom is not an external condition, but an internal recognition. You are already free, you just don't know it yet. Your essence, your true nature, has never been bound by anything. Only your idea of yourself feels limited and constrained. The most successful people in history were not those who accumulated the most, but those who needed the least to be fulfilled. They discovered the secret that the things you think you must have to be happy are the very things that prevent happiness. While others exhaust themselves chasing external validation, they found the infinitely renewable source of well-being within. This doesn't mean rejecting life's pleasures or living in ascetic denial. Rather, it means enjoying everything while needing nothing, appreciating life's gifts without depending on them for your sense of completeness. Practice this freedom by periodically letting go of something you believe you need. Start small, perhaps a daily habit or a cherished opinion. Notice how the space created by letting go fills with a natural contentment that requires no external cause. This is the beginning of true abundance. The less you need, the richer you become. The fewer attachments you have, the more freely you can move through life. This is the paradoxical path to genuine success, not through accumulation, but through liberation from the need to accumulate. The universe is not happening to you. It is happening as you. Every experience you have is not something separate from yourself, but is the universe experiencing itself through the unique pattern that you are. This is not a metaphor or a spiritual belief. It is the literal truth of your existence that becomes obvious when you look clearly. Just as a whirlpool is not separate from the river, but is the river itself in a particular pattern of movement, you are not separate from the totality of existence, but are that existence arranged in the unique pattern called you. Consider this. Your body is made of elements forged in the hearts of stars. The carbon, nitrogen, oxygen that form your cells were created billions of years ago in stellar furnaces and scattered across space when those stars exploded. You are, quite literally, stardust that has evolved into a complex form capable of contemplating its own nature. The universe has developed eyes to see itself, ears to hear itself, a mind to know itself. And those eyes, ears, and mind are what you call me. The most brilliant minds in physics have arrived at the same conclusion as ancient mystics. The observer cannot be separated from the observed. At the quantum level, the act of observation affects what is being observed. The implications are staggering. Consciousness itself is fundamental to reality, not an accidental byproduct. The universe is not a collection of objects, but a communion of subjects, an interconnected web of experiencing. You're not witnessing the universe, you are the universe witnessing itself from a particular perspective. When you operate from this understanding, life becomes less of a struggle and more of a dance. Instead of pushing against reality, you move with it. Rather than forcing outcomes, you align your actions with the natural flow of events. This is not passive. It is the most powerful way to engage with life, like the martial artist who uses the opponent's energy rather than opposing it with force. You accomplish more with less effort. Your actions become like the bamboo that bends in the storm, rather than the oak that resists and breaks. Have you noticed how exhausting it is to maintain the illusion of separation? The constant vigilance required to defend your psychological boundaries, to maintain your self-image, to protect yourself from perceived threats. It depletes your energy and narrows your experience. When you let go of this illusion, that energy becomes available for creativity, for presence, for joy. You stop fighting against life and start flowing with it. This is the secret of those rare individuals who accomplish extraordinary things while maintaining a sense of ease and grace. Consider how much of your suffering comes from resistance to what is. You're in traffic and you're late. Resistance creates anxiety and frustration. Someone criticizes you. Resistance creates defensiveness and hurt. You're facing a challenge. Resistance creates fear and avoidance. Now imagine encountering these same situations without resistance, from a place of fundamental acceptance. The traffic is still there, the criticism still occurred, the challenge still exists, but your experience is completely different. This is the practical benefit of recognizing the illusion of separation. It's not just philosophical, it transforms how you live. What I've shared with you isn't just philosophy. It's the key to a completely different way of being. The suffering you experience comes not from life itself, but from your resistance to life based on a fundamental misunderstanding of who you are. When this illusion dissolves, what remains is an unshakable peace and a natural joy that doesn't depend on circumstances. This isn't about positive thinking or forced optimism. It's about seeing reality clearly, without the distorting lens of illusory separation. This understanding has practical implications for every aspect of your life. In relationships, you stop trying to manipulate others to meet your needs, and instead recognize the deeper unity beneath apparent separation. In work, you act from intrinsic motivation rather than external pressure. In difficult circumstances, you find the capacity to respond with clarity rather than react from fear. None of this means you become passive or indifferent. On the contrary, you engage more fully with life, but from a place of wisdom rather than confusion. The recognition I'm pointing to isn't something you achieve through effort. It's already the case. You just haven't noticed it yet. It's like searching frantically for your glasses when they're on top of your head, or like fish swimming in search of water. You can't attain what you've never lost. You can only recognize what has always been true. This recognition might happen suddenly, like a bolt of lightning, or it might dawn gradually, like the slow brightening of dawn. Either way, it's not something you do. It's something you allow. The practices I've suggested, observing without naming, questioning your assumptions, letting go of control, facing death consciously, are not meant to create this recognition. They're designed to remove the obstacles to it. They're like cleaning a window, so the light that's always been there can shine through clearly. The separate self cannot achieve unity because the very effort reinforces the illusion of separation. Instead, the illusion of separation dissolves when it's clearly seen for what it is, a useful convention that we've mistaken for ultimate reality. Don't take my word for any of this. Test it yourself. Begin today by questioning your assumptions about who you are. Look deeply at your experience without the filter of preconceptions. The truth of what I'm saying doesn't require belief. It requires only honest observation. The transformation is already happening. The only question is whether you'll continue to resist it or allow yourself to awaken to what you've always been. Remember, you're not a separate self having a spiritual experience. You're the spiritual essence having a human experience. The challenges, the joys, the pains, the pleasures, all of it is the universe exploring itself through the unique configuration that you call me. When you know this, not just intellectually, but in the core of your being, the search ends. Not because you found what you were looking for, but because you recognize that you are what you were looking for. The seeker and the sought are one and the same. The freedom, peace, and joy you seek are not states to be attained, but your natural condition when the illusion of separation dissolves. They're like the sun that's always shining above the clouds. The clouds of thought and identification may temporarily obscure it, but they can never extinguish its light. Your true nature is already perfect, already complete, already free. The journey is not about becoming something you're not. It's about unbecoming everything you're not, until all that remains is what you've always been.